I know who it was. But I told him, I said, yeah. I said, I don't care if you showed up at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. Brother Larry was already going to be here. He's going to be in here sitting in the church in the dark and just sitting in his spot. And so, I mean, obviously you never know, from one week to the next, but it's just, to me, it's sad, but for us, we know Brother Larry's in a better place, and he's not sad right now. And so we're thankful for that. We're thankful for his testimony, and thankful for, his faithfulness and everything. So anyway, so I also, like I said, I just got to thinking about it, and I just wanted to say thank you for everyone in here. I don't take the time enough just to say thank you for coming in here and just sitting and listening to me teach. I got to thinking about Brother Larry and everything, and I just wanted, obviously I can't go back and thank him, but I want to thank all y'all for just coming in here, taking your time. I know it's Sunday morning, it's Sunday school, and some of y'all are like, hey, we're going to be here because we go to Sunday school. But here you have options. I mean, obviously you have options. You can be in Brother Mike's class. You can be somewhere else, and I appreciate the fact. I appreciate everyone in here. Again, if I don't tell you, if I don't come up and tell you personally, I appreciate everyone in here taking the time to come sit and listen to me teach for 45 minutes every Sunday morning. And I appreciate y'all. And like I said, it's it's one of the things I don't do enough, but I just want to say thank you. So if you have your Bibles this morning, turn to, thank you, turn to the book of Matthew, chapter number 26. We will continue on with where we were, we're moving on from where we were last week, but in Matthew, chapter number 26, and obviously last week we were at the betrayal of Jesus, and Peter smote off Malchus's ear, and Jesus put the ear back on. And so we're to the point now where they're going to take Jesus. And so in Matthew 26, verse number 55, it says, "In that same hour said Jesus to the multitudes, Are ye come out as against a thief with swords and staves for to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and you laid no hold on me." And if you turn over to Mark chapter number 14, very quickly, Mark chapter number 14 and verse number 48, it's basically the exact same statement. He says, Jesus answered and said unto them, "Are ye come out as against a thief with swords and with staves to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and ye took me not, but the scriptures must be fulfilled." And so in this right here, again, we've been looking at this adversarial relationship that Jesus had with the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees. And here's another chance where, a lot of times Jesus didn't say a whole lot. He didn't say a whole lot. You remember when the woman was taken in adultery, and they brought that woman taken in adultery in the very act. They said caught in the very act, and they brought her to Jesus, and they're like, what do you say about this? Moses said she should be stoned. What do you say? And Jesus didn't say anything. He just stooped down like he didn't hear them, and wrote in the sand, or wrote in the earth. And then when he finally said something, all he said was, "Okay, he that is without sin among you cast the first stone." And then from the oldest to the youngest, they walked away. And Brother Parks, I thought about this, and I never thought about it before, but I believe that coming up in the trial, they're going to be those who were there that day. Those who were there that day, when they were tempting Jesus with that woman taken in adultery, there are going to be those there who were there that day who are also going to be sitting in on the trial of Jesus, sitting there watching. They're going to be condemning Jesus to death. And I wonder if those words, were in their mind as they couldn't even condemn the woman taken in adultery. They couldn't even cast the first stone. Miss Jimmy, they couldn't cast the first stone to that woman taken in adultery. But yet, when it came time to condemn Jesus, they all said, crucify him. They all said, crucify him. And I believe that there were people who were there that day that were going to be there that are what we're about to study right here. And yet, Chris, somehow they got over it. And some of it you're going to see, and I believe is just simply a mob mentality. Well, once you get you get a mob stirred up, you get that mob stirred up, and then there's courage in numbers. But Jesus, when that woman was taken in adultery, Jesus forced them to work individually. It wasn't, let's all pick up a stone. He said, he that's without sin among you cast the first stone. And no one wanted to be the first. My father-in-law, I used to chuckle to make this a little lighter. My father-in-law used to, he never wanted to be first. He never wanted, like when it was time to eat or whatever, he didn't want the girls to go first or whatever. I'm like, how did they ever start eating in that house? Somebody's got to be first. And so then I came along and I said, well, that's fine, then I'll be first. And then y'all, because everyone's kind of standing around like, what do we do now? What do we do now? I'm like, somebody's got to be first, don't they, Brad? Somebody's got to go first. And so then that became my job. But again, Jesus, said, hey, cast the first stone. And no one wanted to be the first. But once they get out of that realm of individual, once they got in this mob that you're going to see, and they had that mob mentality where you're just shouting, crucify him. It wasn't like, so, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but at the trial, it wasn't like one person stood up at a time. It wasn't one person stood up at a time and said, crucify him, condemn him. It wasn't that way. It was just a big group that said, crucify him. And so it's a lot easier. It's a whole lot easier in that mob than it is whenever you have to do it individually. But here's Jesus, and again, I don't think any word that Jesus ever spoke was a wasted word. I don't think any time that he ever had an interaction with those Pharisees, and he bested them on every occasion. I mean, that's what we've looked at for months now. That Jesus bested those Pharisees, he bested those chief priests, he bested those scribes, he bested the Sadducees. Anyone that said we are going to trap him, Jesus bested them every single time. They weren't even close to trapping him, Gil. They thought they had him every time, and Jesus very simply took their words and used them against them. They tried to use the Bible against Jesus. I mean, what a crazy thought. What a crazy thought to think that they're going to use Scripture against Jesus. And so here again, I believe is a time where Jesus is using words. If you remember last week, just at the very end, I talked about how that Jesus, when he was rebuking Peter, he was talking about, if you take up the sword, you're going to perish with the sword. And he goes immediately into asking these people from the chief priests and the rulers and the elders. He goes immediately into them and saying, hey, guys, why are you out here with swords and staves? Why are you out here with swords and staves? Like I said, he had just told Peter, hey, if you take up the sword and use it, you're going to perish with the sword. Obviously, that's my paraphrase, but you understand. And here he is, immediately goes into, guys, why are you out here with swords? I was daily with you. I was with you all the time. I was with you. And we know from the scriptures that there were times that Jesus did have to escape away from them. They did want to kill him multiple times. They did want to take up stones against him and kill him. And Jesus had to go away multiple times from him. But he said, "Hey, look, guys, I was with you. I was with you all the time. I was with you." And in reminding them that he was with them, it was reminding them of his words. It was reminding them of his words. And I was with you in the temple. And he didn't say it. And sometimes you don't have to say it. Sometimes, I don't know how y'all are, but I think most of us are similar, where they're just triggers. They're just triggers, and someone says one thing. If you're musical, someone can say one word. Ask my kids; they know. You say one word sometimes, and Cody, it's a song. It's a song. They're gonna hear a line from a song. It's just if you're into music. And that's your thing. Just one word is a trigger, and next thing you know, you're off on a whole line of a song, singing a song. And all my kids, you know that they can just say "Silver" one time. They can say something, and boom, off I go. And so, but I think Jesus said, "I was daily with you in the temple." And Chris, I think all those people thought, "Oh yeah, I remember a time when he said this. I remember a time when he said this. I remember a time when I felt so condemned in my heart because we were there and we were so angry at him and we hated him, and yet he was kind. He was kind. And he spoke to us, and we were so mean to him. And yes, the words that he spoke we didn't want to hear, but yet they were kind words. They were gracious words. And so I think that he got to them. He got to them just in saying, "Guys, I was with you daily. Daily I was with you in the temple. Daily I spoke with you." Why now? Why now? Why now are you out here? Why now are you out here with swords and staves? If you look in Luke chapter number 11, Luke 22. Luke 22. If you look at Luke chapter number 22, and we're going to look at this right here in Luke 22. Jesus is speaking to them, and in Luke 22, he says, in verse number 52, "Then Jesus said unto the chief priests and captains and the temples and the elders which will come to him, Be ye come out as against a thief with swords and staves?" Again, the same thing. But look, in verse 53, you hear something different. "When I was daily with you in the temple, ye stretched forth no hand against me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness." So, Chris, if you remember in Matthew chapter number 6, verse number 22, he says, "The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness?" And again, like I said, Jesus was... very few words. We know that in these passages that we're going to be studying right here, Jesus didn't say a whole lot. He never said a whole lot. They would accuse and say, what do you got to say for yourself? And he just wouldn't answer. And finally they're like, okay. You know, all these people have witnessed against you. What are you going to say about it? He wouldn't answer. But every time he said something, Chris, it was important. Every time he said something, it was calculated. It was not just words. You know, some people have like they're nervous. When they're nervous, they just talk. Some people, if they're nervous, their hands sweat. Some people, if they're nervous, they kind of, go up into their shell and don't say anything. But other people are nervous talkers. And you can tell that they're nervous talkers. And they're just, they're just trying to say something. They're just trying to work their nerves out. Jesus wasn't nervous. He wasn't nervous. He told him in another passage, and I didn't read it, but he told Peter, he said, I could have called legions of angels down. I could have called all these angels down. I didn't need you to cut off his ear. I could have called all these angels down from my Father if I needed to. But if you look in Matthew 26, and I know I'm bouncing us all around, I'll just read it. But in Matthew chapter number 26, if you look, Jesus understood, and they understood. In verse number 1, it says, it came to pass when Jesus had finished all these things, he said unto his disciples, ye know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Again, that's gonna play into our next study when we actually make it to it, about how Jesus told them over and over and over and over and over, this is what I'm here to do. I'm going to this. Jesus knew he was going to be crucified. In verse number 3, then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people unto the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. But they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. And so again, Jesus, when he was talking to these men right here, when he said that this is your hour and the power of darkness, it was the darkness that was inside of them. It was the darkness that was in them. They thought they were light, but that light was darkness inside of them. They hated a man that had never done them wrong. Yes, he rebuked them. Yes, he got on to them for not being what they were supposed to be, for condemning people and making it hard to come to God instead of easy to come to God. He got on to them over and over and over for that. And they rejected him. They rejected him. And if you look in John chapter number 10. If you look in John chapter number 10, verse number 31, then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. And I know we studied this, and we're kind of just tying everything all back together here. But it says, then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. Jesus answered them, many good works have I showed you from my Father. For which of those works do ye stone me? The Jews answered him, saying, for a good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy. And because thou being a man, makest thyself God. Jesus answered them, is it not written in your law, I said ye are gods? If he called them gods, unto whom the word of God came, and the scripture cannot be broken, say ye of him of whom the Father has sanctified and sent into the world, thou blasphemest? Because I said, I am the Son of God? Now, again, like I said, I mean, we know that when Jesus goes on trial before the Sanhedrin, they are condemning him for blasphemy. When he goes before Pilate and Herod, that's not what he's on trial for. It's not for blasphemy. They basically said that he was, treason and sedition, and he was trying to subvert the people and refuse to give tribute to Caesar, and it was two totally different things. But from Matthew 26, verse number 1, we know that they already had Jesus condemned to die. It was just they needed a crime. They needed a crime committed. They needed an accusation. They needed something that they could go to. Because the Jews, because of they were under the Romans, the Jews could not condemn someone to death. They had to get the Romans to do it, and so they needed something to happen, Chris, so that they could take him to Pilate and have him killed. And so here again, like I said, they took up stones themselves. Oh, we don't need the Romans. We're going to take up stones ourselves. But look at, again, like I said, here's Jesus besting them again. He says, verse 37, if I do not the works of my Father, believe me not. But if I do, though you believe not me, believe the works, that ye may know and believe that the Father is in me and I in him. Therefore they sought again to take him, but he escaped out of their hand. And so again, here in that passage right there, Jesus, they took up stones to stone him, and they wanted to stone him for blasphemy. And again, that's what they're going to put him on trial in the Sanhedrin for. That's what they're going to put him when he's before Caiaphas. That's what they're putting him on trial, is blasphemy. And if you remember in another passage, they said, how long do you make us doubt? Tell us plainly. Tell us plainly. And he's like, I've told you. And you're not listening. You're not listening because you don't want to know. You don't truly want to know. You just want to condemn me. You just want to go on about enjoying the fruits of your religion. And again, not that they were truly serving God, but they were using their religion to make themselves wealthy. Again, I mean, the high priest, they go to his palace. They don't go to his house, they go to his palace. I think that's a little different. But you understand that here, Jesus said, hey, look, he said, don't judge me for my words. If you don't like my words, then judge my actions. And remember when they said, well, when Christ cometh, will he do more miracles than this man has done? He said, will he do more miracles? Are there going to be more miracles? Is there something that this man, is there a miracle that Jesus has done? Is there something more that he could do? Is there another miracle that he could do? Is there another miracle that he hasn't done that he should do? And the answer was no, because he'd done all the miracles. What miracle you want to talk about? Blind receive their sight? Check. Deaf hear? Check. Devils, removed and cast into swine? Check. Dead men raised to life? Check. All those miracles. And if you remember, whenever Lazarus was raised to life, again, what did the Jews want to do? They wanted to kill Lazarus. They said, we're going to have to do something not just about Jesus, we're going to have to do something about Lazarus. Because people were converting to Christianity away from Judaism because of Lazarus. And they said, hey, we want to kill him. So here you have Jesus, and he says to them in Luke 22, but this is your hour and the power of darkness. He said, this is your time, fellas. This is your time. This is the time. That darkness that you've taken hold of, that darkness that you've embraced, that you refuse to come to the light, that you might have life. you refuse to come to that, and you will not take an honest assessment. Just an honest assessment. Just take a look. Just take a look and say, when Christ cometh, will he do more miracles? They didn't want to hear it, Chris. They didn't want to hear it. And remember that they sent spies. They sent spies in among them, Cody. And they're like, hey, and you remember we looked at it how when those spies came in, they were there to trap Jesus. And they were the pest in the class. They were like, excuse me, I got a question. Answer this question. And he answered it every time. He answered it every time. And how that the Jews, they'd sent officers in, and they come back and they said, why have you not taken him? And they said, never man spake like this man. Never man spake like this man. And so people that had an honest assessment of Jesus come away and said, well, I'm going to say what Pilate's going to say. I find no fault in him. I'm going to say what Herod had to say. I find no fault in him. I'm going to say what that Roman soldier at the cross had to say. Surely this man was the Son of God. But Chris, there is one group of people. There is one group of people that looked at every miracle that Jesus did, and again, just like I said last week, whenever Malchus's ear was smote off, that was done so they could see. That was done so Jesus could have left that ear off. He could have left that ear off. He's like, all right, boys, you're here to take me. Why should I do anything for him? Why should I do anything for him? Why should I do anything? He's here to take me. He's here to, y'all are here to condemn me. Y'all are here to pass judgment on me and then send me to Pilate and have me condemned to be crucified. Why would I do anything? Why would I do anything for Malchus? But instead, Peter smote that ear off, and Jesus stooped down, picked that ear up, and stuck that ear back on. And Brother Wayne, I think all throughout the trial, they had to overcome all of their memories, all of their recollections of words that Jesus said, of miracles they saw performed in their own eyes. There were people there that, had this been an honest trial, which we're about to step over into, had this been an honest trial, there are people there who Jesus could have, again, he was quiet. He didn't say, he didn't defend himself, he didn't try to defend himself. But he could have said, you were there. If you remember, that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen to Peter. We're not going to look at that study. We're not going to look at that. We're not going to study that part of this. But we know that while Jesus is on trial, Peter is going through his own trial and failing. Peter's going to deny the Lord, and he's going to deny him multiple times. And there are maids that said, "Oh yeah, you're one of them. Oh yeah, you were there." And then they were there, and they say, "Hey, I remember you." And he's like, "No. But Jesus could have certainly went around the room and said, "Do you remember when I did this? Do you remember when I did this? I know you were there. Do you remember that woman? Do you remember that woman taken in adultery? Yes, you were there. You were the fourth one to walk away." Jesus could have very easily defended himself with people who had first account eyewitnesses of his miracles. They were sitting in that room, Chris, and because it was their hour and the power of darkness, instead of embracing him and running to him and saying, you know, like they're going to say later in Acts, "Sir, what must I do to be saved? What must I do to have eternal life?" They said, "Crucify him." Because the power of darkness. And so if you look in John chapter number 18, in John chapter number 18, we're going to start getting into the trial of Jesus right here. And in John chapter number 18, verse number 12, it says, "Then the band and the captain and officer of the Jews took Jesus and bound him." And again, I say why. Jesus went willingly. Again, if you remember from John 18, just a few verses before, whenever excuse me, flipped over too far. But whenever they came and he said, "Whom seek ye?" They said, "Jesus of Nazareth." As soon then as he had said, verse 6, as soon then as he said this unto them, "I am he," they went backwards and fell to the ground. Even in that, Gil, he showed he had power. And they had no power. But he went willingly. He went willingly. There was no reason to bind him because he was going willingly. But the reason they bound him, and I thought about this, whether that's if we look at it in our context, if you see a trial, or if you've ever been to a courtroom and been on a jury, if you've been on jury duty, thankfully it's been a while since I've been on jury duty, but you go there, and Chris, there is a large difference in perception. If the defendant comes in walking and he looks like Brother Parks, and he's got a suit and a tie on, there's a difference in perception than the guy that comes walking in and he's got chains on his arms, chains on his feet, and he's got an orange prison jumpsuit on. If I just stood two men up, one guy is standing there in a suit and tie, and another guy is standing there in leg irons and chains on their arm, and they're chained together, and he's in a prison jumpsuit, and I said, "Hey, which of these two do you think are most likely guilty?" 100 times out of 100, you're going to point at the guy in the leg irons and say, "That guy's got to be one bad dude because they got to keep him chained up. That guy cannot be trusted." They both could have committed the same crime. And honestly, if you want to do it for a test, this guy could have committed all kinds of serious crimes. This guy may have never done anything. They just brought him in dressed up that way just to see how partial you would be. But you understand that mentally, just drive down the road. Just drive down the road. Drive down the road and see an officer with someone pulled over, and a lot of times they just detain them. They're not under arrest. They're just detained. And so you see them standing there with their arms behind their back and they got cuffs on. They're not under arrest. But when you drive by and you see someone with their arms behind their back and cuffs on them, you're like, "Oh, that guy," which for us, it must be drugs in the car. That's what I think. Must be drugs. I've already condemned this man as guilty, Brother Wayne. I don't even know that the man's under arrest. I just know that the police officer pulled him over, and once he put cuff on him, he must be guilty of something, because surely the police officer wouldn't put cuffs on him if he wasn't guilty. And so there is a mentality, there is an understanding that binding Jesus is going to change the perception of Jesus. How can you claim to be all powerful? How can you claim to be the Son of God? Again, we know who Jesus was. But understand, they were trying to change the perception to people for this multitude to be like, "Oh, okay, he's not all powerful." Because if he was all powerful, there's no way that binding him would work. He could unbind himself. They're going to say it all the way to the cross. He saved others, himself he cannot save. He saved others, himself he cannot save. But yet, so binding Jesus, there was no need to bind Jesus. There was a multitude. I read the word multitude. You got people from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They sent all their group, but there was also Roman soldiers there. What is one man going to do against all those people with swords and staves? Jesus doesn't have one. The two that were with Jesus, Peter used the one. We don't know who had the other one, but it never got used. And by this time, the disciples, which Jesus said, hey, look, these guys haven't done anything. Just let them go. And all the disciples were gone. Now it's just Jesus. Why did they need to bind him? They didn't. They did it for perception. They did it to make him look guilty. They did it to make him look weak. Here he is walking bound. It's like, he's bound. he's bound. But what they're about to do, what they're about to do is they're going to do. Turn over to 1 Kings chapter number 21. I'm going to read something to you right here. 1 Kings chapter number 21, verse number 9. And so they're about to try Jesus. And so now they're carrying him bound. And the first place they go is Annas' house. And then they're going to go to Caiaphas. But what they're about to do, Chris, is so unjust. Everything about the condemnation of Jesus was unjust. From the way they took him. I mean, they couldn't do it in open. They knew they couldn't do it in the open. They knew it would cause a riot if they did it in open. Why? Because Jesus did so much good. So they had to do it secretly. They had to do it in a place where they could get in, get him, try him, and basically have him condemned before people even woke up. Before they even woke up, they didn't realize that here this man that had come and done so much good is now condemned to death. And so they're going to use again, I mean, they're condemning Jesus for blasphemy, but they break almost every commandment in the book trying to condemn Jesus. But in 1 Kings chapter number 21, look at where they got their thoughts from. In verse number 7, and again, this is Ahab wants Naboth's vineyard. Naboth says, no, I'm not giving it to you. I'm not selling it to you. In verse number 7, Jezebel, his wife, said unto him, dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread, and let thine heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, and sealed them with his seal, and sent the letters unto the elders and to the nobles that were in his city dwelling with Naboth. And she wrote in the letters, saying, proclaim a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people. And set 2 men, sons of Belial, before him, to bear witness against him, saying, thou didst blaspheme God. What's Jesus on trial for? Blasphemy. And so here is Jezebel, and she says, I'll tell you how to get rid of somebody. The best way to get rid of somebody is to just bring 2 witnesses in and say, you blaspheme God and the king. And so thou didst blaspheme God and the king, and then carry him out and stone him, that he may die. And the men of his city, even the elders and the nobles who were the inhabitants of his city, did as Jezebel had sent unto them. And as it was written in the letters which she had sent unto them, they proclaimed a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people. And there came in 2 men, children of Belial, and sat before him. And the men of Belial witnessed against him, even against Naboth, in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth did blaspheme God and the king. Then they carried him forth out of the city and stoned him with stones that he died. Tell me the difference between what the Pharisees are going to do, the chief priest is going to do, and what Jezebel did. Tell me the difference. If you remember in Luke chapter number 20, verse number 20, easy verse to remember because it's 2020. Luke chapter 20, and they watched him and sent forth spies, which should feign themselves just men, that they might take hold of his word, so they might deliver him unto the power and authority of the governor. In John chapter 18, verse number 13, and they led him away to Annas first, for he was father-in-law to Caiaphas, which was the high priest that same year. Now Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. Skip a couple verses right there. And verse number 19, the high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whither the Jews always resort. In secret have I said nothing. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me. What have said I unto them? Behold, they know what I said. Jesus said, why are you asking me this? I've always taught in the temple. Again, here he is resorting to bringing back up to their mind. Tell me something. Jesus is going to say, let me read it. In verse 22, and when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, answerest thou the high priest so? Jesus wasn't rude. He wasn't rude. He said, "Look, you're asking me a question. You're asking like I've got something hidden. There's nothing hidden. I haven't said anything in secret. I've said it openly in the temple, in the synagogues. You've heard me." Look at what Jesus says in verse number 23. Again, he said very few things, but what he said was very important. In verse 23, Jesus answered him, "If I have spoken evil, bear witness. If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why smitest thou me?" He said, if I've spoken evil, say it now. Say it now. Speak up. I'm listening. He said, you just hit me. You just smote me because of how I answered the high priest. What have I said that was evil? Name one. But Chris, like I said, it was their hour and the power of darkness. They didn't care. They didn't have to name one, Brother Parks. They didn't have to name one. They already had Jesus condemned. It was the sentence was produced before there was ever a crime produced. The sentence was death. And honestly, there was never even a crime. They sought a reason to kill Jesus. Again, that's not how justice works. You commit a crime and you're judged for that crime, and then you face the penalty for that crime. I mean, I don't think my kids would like to wake up in the morning and be like, "Come in here," and then me spank them with a belt, and they say, "What's that for?" I don't know. You're probably going to do something today. Probably going to do something today, and honestly, that might be true, but that was never going to be true for Jesus. He was never going to do something worthy to even be rebuked for, much less condemned to die. And he said, if I've spoken evil, bear witness. And the man that just struck him with his palm couldn't say a word. He just struck him with his palm, but he couldn't say a word. Why? Because there was no evil. Jesus had done no evil. And we know we're going to get into it next week. We're going to get into it where they start bringing in these false witnesses. And they couldn't get two to agree. And they finally get two to agree, and it's the flimsiest thing ever. It's the flimsiest thing ever. And the high priest is like, all right, let's just stop this because this is not working. Let's just cut to the chase here, because I can't even, at least Jezebel was able to get two witnesses to agree. They couldn't even get two witnesses to agree. And so we're going to look at that next week. Thank you.